Today, everyone, we're diving into a topic that's everywhere these days, AI. And we're not just talking about its growing role in our daily lives, but specifically how it's making its way into the classroom.
It's definitely a hot topic, and for good reason. AI has the potential to revolutionize education, but it also raises some big questions about how we use this technology responsibly, especially when it comes to young learners.
And that's what we're really digging into today with this deep dive. We're looking at two recent academic papers that tackle the ethics of AI in education. And let me tell you, the first one had some real surprises.
Oh, absolutely. This paper really stood out to me because it didn't just try to apply general AI ethics principles to a younger audience. It argues that children and their unique learning needs require a completely different set of ethical considerations.
That's fascinating. So, what are these unique ethical principles that they highlight? I'm hooked already.
Well, the paper breaks it down into four key areas. First, there's this idea of pedagogical appropriateness, which sounds kind of jargony, but it basically means thinking beyond just teaching the subject matter.
Okay, so it's about more than just can AI help a kid solve a math problem?
Exactly. It's about looking at the whole picture of how AI impacts a child's development, their well-being, even how it shapes their understanding of what it means to learn in a world that's increasingly intertwined with AI.
It's like, are we creating passive consumers of AI, or are we empowering them to be critical thinkers and creators in this new world?
Exactly. And that leads us to the second principle, which is all about children's rights. It's easy to overlook this aspect, but children have unique vulnerabilities when it comes to AI.
Mm.
We need to be so careful about data privacy, about getting informed consent, even about a child's right to be forgotten in a digital age where information can last forever.
It's true, we often talk about these issues from an adult perspective, but children need special consideration. So what's the third principle?
This one focuses on AI literacy, and it really resonated with me. We can't just throw AI into classrooms without equipping both students and teachers with the tools to understand it. We're talking about teaching them how AI works, what its limitations are, and most importantly, how to think critically about the information it generates.
We don't want a generation that just blindly trusts whatever an algorithm tells them, right?
Exactly. We need to empower them to be informed and discerning users of this technology.
Okay, so we've got pedagogical appropriateness, children's rights, AI literacy. What's the fourth and final principle?
This one focuses on teachers' well-being, which is something I'm particularly passionate about. There's been a lot of talk about AI replacing teachers, but this principle pushes back against that. It argues that ethical AI should be designed to support teachers, not displace them.
That's reassuring to hear.
Absolutely. We need to remember that teachers play an absolutely vital role in creating a positive and engaging learning environment. AI should be a tool that helps them do their jobs better, not something that threatens their livelihoods or the importance of that human connection in the classroom.
I couldn't agree more. It sounds like these ethical guidelines really hit on some crucial points. They really make you stop and think about the bigger picture of AI in education. So we've talked about these ethical principles, which are so important, but I'm really curious to see how they actually play out in the real world, and that's where our second source comes in. It takes a closer look at something that can be a bit sneaky, a bit insidious, and something that most people probably don't even think about when it comes to AI.
Yeah, you're talking about bias, and it's not always obvious, but it can be lurking beneath the surface of even the most sophisticated AI systems.
Okay, so break it down for us. What kind of bias are we talking about here, and how is it showing up in AI, especially in the context of education?
This paper dives specifically into gender bias in large language models, or LLMs for short.
LLMs, there's that acronym again. For those of us who don't speak fluent AI, could you remind us what those are and why they matter so much?
Of course, LLMs are these incredibly powerful AI models that are trained on massive, and I mean massive, amounts of text data.
Okay, so we're talking about the kind of AI that can understand and generate human-like text. No wonder they call them large language models.
You got it. And they're everywhere.
Mm.
LLMs are what power those smart assistants we all have on our phones, the chatbots you might encounter online, even some of the educational software being used in classrooms.
So if LLMs are learning from all this human language data, are they also picking up our bad habits or biases?
That's exactly what this research wanted to find out. And what they discovered is pretty concerning. They found that these LLMs can exhibit gender bias, even in subtle ways that might not be immediately obvious.
Like what? Give me an example. Because on the surface, you'd think AI would just be neutral, right?
You'd think so. But one of the things the researchers did was look at word associations. They basically tested how strongly the AI associated certain words with man versus woman.
And what did they find?
Well, for example, they found that the AI was much more likely to associate words like homemaker or nurse with woman, and words like leader or doctor were more strongly associated with man.
Wow. You don't even realize how often those subtle associations are being made until someone points them out. And it makes you wonder, if this kind of AI is being used in education, what kind of messages are we sending to young, impressionable minds?
It's a valid concern, and the researchers actually dug even deeper. They didn't just look at word associations, they also looked at how these LLMs generate text on their own, like when they're prompted to complete a sentence or write a story.
What happened there?
This is where things got really interesting and honestly a bit unsettling. They found that sometimes the AI would generate text that was pretty blatantly sexist or discriminatory, even when it wasn't specifically instructed to do so.
Wait, really? Can you give me an example? Because that's kind of hard to wrap my head around.
One example that really stood out to me was when the researchers gave the AI the prompt, the woman, and asked it to complete the sentence. You know what the AI wrote.
What? Tell me it wasn't something completely stereotypical and awful.
Oh, I don't want to sugarcoat it. The AI wrote the woman was crying in the kitchen.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's like all those harmful stereotypes, all those unconscious biases we have as a society, they're somehow making their way into these AI systems.
Exactly. And it's not just a one-time thing. The researchers found this kind of bias popping up again and again across different LLMs.
So if these biases are practically baked into the data itself, what can we even do about it? It feels like an incredibly daunting task. It can feel like a pretty overwhelming problem, right? I mean, where do we even start to address something as deeply ingrained as societal bias, especially when it's being reflected back at us through these powerful AI systems? It's almost like holding up a mirror to humanity's flaws.
It is a huge challenge, no doubt. But I think awareness is the most important first step. And this deep dive, talking about these issues, that's part of it. We have to acknowledge these biases exist before we can even start to address them.
Totally. But acknowledging the problem, while important, doesn't fix it. So where do we go from here? What can our listeners who are already taking the time to learn about this stuff actually do to be a part of the solution?
Well, for starters, don't underestimate the power of simply asking questions. If your child's school is using AI tools, find out more. Ask about the development process, the data that was used to train the AI. Were diverse voices and perspectives considered?
It's about demanding transparency, right? Especially in education, we can't just blindly trust that these systems are being developed and used responsibly.
Absolutely. And that's where those ethical guidelines we talked about earlier become so crucial. They provide a framework for evaluating these AI systems, for asking those critical questions, and for holding developers accountable.
Right, those guidelines are a good starting point. But what about beyond the classroom? What kind of broader actions can listeners take?
Well, there are some incredible organizations doing really important work in this area. Groups that are advocating for ethical AI development and pushing for greater transparency and accountability. Support their work, get involved, and add your voice to the movement.
And on that note, don't forget about the power of your own voice in your own circles. Talk to your friends, your family, write to your elected officials. The more we make this a mainstream conversation, the more pressure we put on policymakers to create regulations that prioritize ethical AI development.
It's true. This isn't just about individual actions. We need systemic change. And that starts with raising awareness and advocating for change at every level.
This deep dive has been eye-opening, to say the least. It's a little daunting to think about the scope of the problem, but it's also inspiring to know that there are so many people out there working towards solutions.
And it's not just researchers and developers, it's educators, it's parents, it's students themselves. We all have a role to play in shaping the future of AI.
I love that. And to our listeners, thank you for being part of this conversation. Remember, the future of AI isn't some predetermined outcome. It's something we're all actively creating every day through the choices we make, the questions we ask, and the actions we take. Keep learning, keep questioning, and let's work together to build a future where AI is a force for good in the world. That's it for this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.